Have you been suffering with harm OCD? Are you ready to get better? Listen to me. Go ahead. Get your pen and paper. We're going to take some notes. We're going to write some stuff down. We're going to begin our recovery journey from harm OCD. Quick disclaimer. This is not medical advice. I'm not a doctor. I'm a therapist, but I'm not your therapist. This is not a replacement for psychotherapy or mental health treatment. If you would like to seek mental health treatment, find a therapist in your state and contact them. Okay, thank you. So now we're going to start. I'm going to share, like I always do, some just important, brief facts about OCD, because no matter what kind of OCD, whatever theme you have, it all works the same. Harm OCD is no different from any other type of OCD. So how it works is really quite simple. There's your prefrontal cortex. This is your thinking, rationalizing, this is the reasoning part of our brain, right? This is the amygdala over here somewhere, and it is the little troublemaker. This is our fight or flight. This is our overactive alarm system. This is the thing that's sending a signal to release the cortisol and the adrenaline so that you have that scared, freaked out feeling. And then your prefrontal cortex is like, oh my God, what is that? Like, this is so scary. Like, how do I turn it off? And the amygdala's like, you don't know, I don't know. And then they're just kind of going back and forth. And it creates that nice OCD cycle that we all have been in before, right? So we need to disrupt the cycle by first training the prefrontal cortex, right? Getting this nice and ready so that when this gets triggered, we are not going to do the things that make us more sick. We're going to do the things that make us better. We're going to teach that amygdala, right? We're going to talk the talk, so we're going to write it all out, right? Train this part, and then we're going to walk the walk. That's the exposures. Because the amygdala doesn't learn by talking. The amygdala learns by experiencing, right? So that's why it's not just enough for somebody to tell you what's going on. You have to actually go and work through it, right? Okay, so all right, so we're moving on. So what is harm OCD? So harm OCD can look like, I'm afraid I'm going to lose control and hurt somebody. I'm going to go crazy. I'm going to kill somebody. I secretly want to kill somebody. I secretly want to hurt somebody. I'm not sure if I want to hurt someone or not. Any of those, right? Because we have that doubt, right? Like, how can I be sure? Guess what? You can't be sure of anything. That doesn't exist, right? We have a big claim with very little evidence, and that's what you're going to see with every single OCD theme, right? Is like, there's a gigantic claim, very scary, with the tiny evidence, right? I'm going to do this. I had a thought and a sensation. Right? Like, what? Right. Think about it. That wouldn't hold up in a court of law. Right? Like, we think he committed the crime. How do you know? Thoughts. We're pretty sure he thought about it. And I think he wanted to, too. Not enough, right? Not enough. So, we're going to break our own fear down, right? So, just to clarify, it's harm to self or harm to others, right? So oftentimes it's harm to others. It can also be harm to self. So we're going to go over both. So I can't talk exactly to you, but I've worked with this enough. So I know I can kind of guess, right? Like what that fear, breaking down that fear might look like. So that might look like, I'm afraid that I could hurt one of my loved ones. I'm afraid that I'm going to lose control and possibly use a knife or some other weapon and harm that person, possibly kill them. If that were to happen, I could be exiled, I could be hated, I would live in shame forever, I would never recover, I would go to jail, it would be a miserable existence, there would be no more life left for me, that would just be it for me, right? We can see that this is all in black and white thinking, right? All or nothing. It's over for me, right? I did this thing and it's over, Now, one thing that I want you to remember is that with very few exceptions, we have control over our actions. We don't control our trigger, right? We can't control that necessarily. We can't control our thoughts. We can't even always control whether we have an emotion or not, but we can control our reaction to it, and we have control over our actions, right? When I'm breaking the fear down with people, I go like this. Okay. You ain't losing control and harming somebody if you don't intend to do that unless you choose to do it in a moment. There are a few exceptions, right? Sometimes people that are experiencing psychosis can lose touch with reality, and this may happen to them. If you do not have psychosis, right, and you'd probably know if you did, I don't know, right? I'm not sure. I'm not your therapist. I'm not saying you do or don't, but it's kind of obvious when you have psychosis, not really something that's easy to hide, right? And if you have psychosis, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going on a killing rampage, right? People that have psychosis, many people do, and they're living well, and they're living normal lives, right, with treatment. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to go on a killing rampage, right? So if you don't have psychosis, and you'd probably know if you did, right, you can't prevent having psychosis. You can't, right? There are some things that they say like, well, these and these and these are like risk factors. That's true, maybe, but you got to have the genetic predisposition, and it usually happens for people in their late teens, early 20s. Is that true for everyone? No. Could I go psychotic while making this? Could I go into a psychotic episode? Yes, I could. Is that going to happen? Probably not. Not really likely, right? So we gotta, again, there's no such thing as 100% certainty, but it's just not adding up, right? The other possibility is that maybe you're using meth. I don't know if you are, but if you are, we should be talking about that, right? Like, that's the bigger issue. That's the bigger issue, right? Because sometimes people go into meth psychosis and then they lose touch with reality, right? That's its own separate thing. We should talk about that first if that's what's going on. If that's not what's going on, okay, let's go to the next thing. So the other thing is, if you're a psychopath, well, if you were, you probably wouldn't care if you were just going to harm somebody at any moment, right? That's not, you don't have you don't have the empathy, right? You wouldn't have the empathy. That's the whole idea, right? The other very rare circumstance is when somebody is involved in a crime of passion. Crime of passion can happen, like, for example, you walk in and your husband of like 25 years is in bed with your sister, maybe, I don't know, right? Something extreme like that. And they say that the person could go like in a fugue state or something. That doesn't even always happen, right? But like, okay, like, but that OCD, lose control, that's not a thing, right? It's not a thing. So we're checking those things. If those things aren't happening, those things, like, you always are going to have control over your actions, right? Now, I mean, not always, but mostly, right? Can we have 100% certainty about that? No, because 100% certainty doesn't exist for anything. This could literally happen to me right now. Technically, I can't prove that it's not going to happen, right? But I'm going to go ahead and trust that it's not and just go on living, right? So, okay, going over to what if I wanted to harm myself? Okay, barring what we just talked about, if you want to hurt yourself, this happens to people sometimes. People do get suicidal sometimes, right? It happens a lot. What are we going to do? We make a safety plan. Okay, if I'm ever suicidal, you know what? I'm going to call the suicide hotline, 988. I'm going to text the suicide hotline, 741-741, right? I'm going to call the California Warm Line if I want to talk to somebody, right? Like, I'm going to reach out to my friend. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm going to get help. See how OCD puts you in a corner and tells you you're stuck and you're not getting out? Right? You're stuck, you're trapped. If this happens, it's too late. No, that's not true. There's always a way. There's always a way to move through. There's always a way for redemption. There's always a way for recovery, treatment, right? You're not stuck. And OCD wants you to think you're stuck. No, we're not letting OCD think we're stuck. We're not stuck, right?